All right, welcome back to part two of our spoiler breakdown for Empire of Glass. As a reminder, I guess, since we haven't talked about it yet, I am Locopojo on YouTube, Twitch, Patreon, and Twitter. So if you'd like to support the stream, you can support us on Patreon or sub to us on Twitch for free with Amazon Prime. If you have Amazon Prime, you get a free Prime sub that you can toss our way to support the stream. It's also just helpful to hang out, chat, clip things, and just generally be kind and wonderful, generous people in the community, which thus far everyone has always been. I'm so grateful for this community. It's pretty amazing. With that said, let's get into the rest of these spoilers. There's still quite a lot to go. Starting with Amber Lock. Summon, draw a card, pay 4 and sacrifice Amber Lock to draw a card. This is part of a cycle of relics, or at least like a theme around relics, where you get a useful summon ability that's okay, and then you also get to sacrifice the card later to do something else, or rather repeat the effect. In this case, it's pay 6 to draw 2 cards, but you are of course getting a relic down on turn 2, which is a big deal for any cards that care about relics being in the field, whether it's something like Honey Pot, where you get damage based on what kind of relics you have out, or if it's something like the 4/2 Sentinel that gets a +1/+1. This is a pretty strong draft mechanic that also forces you to make interesting decisions in draft as to whether or not you want to sacrifice a card to get a benefit when cards on your board might end up benefiting from it. We're already seeing a lot of this in the draft previews. It's clearly not a strong card in most Throne or Expedition formats. Even in Expedition, this is probably not something you're going to want to play a significant amount, but it is a way to play relics and then get the value back for those relics pretty easily. And it draws 2 cards, which is not unreasonable. But yeah, has to be a lot cheaper to really be effective in Expedition. And in Draft, this is just a card where you get some value back and you make all of your other relic things go active, which certainly not unreasonable. You might want a couple of those, or probably just one. Overloader. When you amplify a card, you get +2 this power this turn for each amplify. That's disgusting, actually. This is the card that we were talking about that might specifically support amplify. This basically allows you to amplify a card into amplifying more cards into amplifying more cards. So Overloader basically makes it so that you can try a cheap amplify and then get a bunch of ramp off of it, and then you can ramplify. I'll go now. Yeah, so this is actually a pretty interesting combo card. I can see it being a thing in Throne or Expedition based on the power level of Amplify cards. I think it's probably something that you would be happy to pick up in a draft if you are going for just any amount of ridiculous nonsense with Amplify cards. If you want to make a bunch of treasure troves, this is clearly the card that you're doing that with. Having an Overloader out actually makes that colorless treasure trove card perfectly reasonable, because for every 2 that you play, you get in a treasure trove, and you get 2 power to play that treasure trove, thus drawing you the cards that you want. So there you go. There's the support for that card. Certainly wouldn't have rated that card very highly, but if you manage to get the 2 together, that's a snap pick. Very, very fun. Short Hopper. Summon, discard a spell from your market to give Short Hopper flying if it has an odd cost, or +2 strength if it's even. Okay, I have to take a quick check on this again. It's a Grenadin Kirin. It's actually a Grenadin Ostrich, but that's fine. Ultimate pay 6 to draw a spell from your void and give it void bound. So if you can reduce the cost of Short Hopper, you can make it fly. But it's an ostrich, so not gonna happen naturally. Whenever you have to play it and discard a spell from your market. Oh, no, never mind. Hang on a sec. You discard a spell from your market. I was thinking that the Short Hopper had to be in your market. Yes. So yeah, you discard a spell from your market, and you can either make a 4/4 flyer happen if the spell is odd, or you can make a 6/4 happen if the spell is even. In either case, you get a pretty decent unit that you're going to be pretty happy with in Skycrag. This is clearly something that's going to be kind of a bomb in any type of draft format, because it's a 4/4 flyer for 4, which is pretty ridiculous. So yeah, this is a pretty definite rare cost, and then paying 6 to get you an extra spell is also a pretty good bonus. Like, this has like the Ancient Serpent ability on top of that. I think that overall this card seems very strong. Like, you play Ancient Serpents in Expedition right now, you might even play them in Throne, and this is a better version of Ancient Serpent where you get to not only like maybe discard a spell that you want to make sure that you can get the card back later, but you get a 4/4 flyer, and you get the ability to get card advantage by getting a spell back from your void, which is a very big deal that like actually you are really happy to see. Ancient Serpent is a really good card. Short Hopper is clearly kind of bonkers. I actually think this card is one of the stronger like cards in draft right now, and it's going to be pretty good in Expedition as well. If you liked Ancient Serpent, that is a significant improvement over Ancient Serpent, unless I'm missing something. You do have to discard the spell from your market, which is sort of a drawback, but A, there's ways to create spells in your market, and B, like, you're probably pretty happy to do that if you have ways to recur cards from your void. So, yeah, no, it's really, really good. The drawback is barely a drawback at all. It's cheaper, and it's better than Ancient Serpent. Cast Iron Furnace. Deal 1 damage to the enemy player. Then if you have 5 or more factionless cards in your void, play a 5/5 Dragon Simulacre with Flying. LSV, I believe, spoiled this recently on their Twitter. Yeah, super cool. So this is a power that deals damage to the player, which is already kind of a big deal. It's colorless, but it basically says that if you're playing a colorless deck, you get a free 5/5 Dragon Simulacre with Flying. So petitioning for this means that you can like immediately put a 4th card into your void, or a 5th card into your void if you have 4 factionless cards in your void, and then you start playing dragons. This is the kill that you really need in a colorless deck, assuming that you don't just have Kaifus, but I mean, you definitely need more than 1 kill in these types of decks, and so yeah, this is something where you get quite a bit of value and a pretty good flyer out of a very nasty power. It's colorless power only though, so you're not really going to play it in Expedition or Throne, and you're probably not going to play it all that much in Draft, but if you want to chase a colorless draft archetype, and I think that is actually possible, this is a card that you can probably pick up as your first pick and then build the rest of the deck around trying to get colorless cards. I think there's enough of them that it'll actually work. Because we have Replicated Sellsword. I'm pretty sure Replicator is going to be in the format. Probably most of the other colorless cards are going to be in the format. Yeah, I'd say this will probably play in draft as long as you pick it first. Otherwise, never. Djang-li the Misfit. Overwhelm 3/4. Each unit in your deck with a unique name gets +3 strength. So just like a neat little card that benefits cards in the same way that Archmagister's Prophecy does. Although you kind of have to play multiple copies of it, which means that other Djang-lis do not get the bonus. 3/4 for 4 is not a great stat line, and extra strength is not really a thing that you're looking for. And it doesn't affect cards in your hand, cards in play, or cards in your void, all of which are things that would make the card quite a bit better. I don't think it's a super strong choice. I think it's okay in a draft environment, because a 3/4 for 4 is fine in draft, and that extra strength is obviously going to be a big deal if you have a bunch of flyers that are just your one-of flyer. You're probably going to feel pretty happy about that. This also makes for some interesting draft decisions, like do you want to pick up a second copy of the like the 4/6 with endurance, or like some other like bomb flyer, or do you want to like try to stack Djang-li's and then like make sure that all of your like cruddy flyers are the cards that are going to win you the game. So yeah, really interesting card in draft, probably pretty powerful because of that like extra stat bonus. In Expedition, I think it's unlikely this card's going to see too much play. The Overwhelm is really nice, so that like gives it a little bit of a boost, but like overall, yeah, not so sure. Also, this is like the oldest man I have ever heard called a misfit. I just like feel like that term is reserved for like teenagers. Yeah, I don't know. Let me know in the comments what you think. This is like, I've never heard an old somebody who is like above like 80 referred to as a misfit. That's like kind of, I feel like that just kind of comes with the territory. You're expected to be kind of cranky and crotchety at that point. In any case, he's clearly enjoying his art. Love the art on this card. All right. Invasive Species we have covered, but yeah, cool market options. Scythe Slash, give a unit +4 and overwhelm this turn, then plunder. So as a fast spell, this is actually pretty good. It's rapid shot power level, because you are getting just an immediate huge spike in damage, which if you're doing it on a quick draw unit, wow, that's pretty good. And then you also get to plunder afterwards, which is, yeah, super nice bonus. You're definitely going to play this in draft. It doesn't save your cards or give you card advantage, which is something that's like, you know, going to be pretty relevant, but I think it still plays an expedition, and honestly, I could see it in the Throne deck. Overwhelm is not that easy to get in certain fast spells. Like, Rampage is the only other card that currently does this, and I think you play Rampage in Throne. If you play Rampage in Throne, you'd probably play Scythe Slash in Throne. It still makes it so the unit probably dies in any sort of trade, but if the unit is a decay or quick draw unit, you're actually happier to have Scythe Slash than you are to have Rampage. It just makes it a little more vulnerable to removal, like char and other things like that. So it's kind of meta dependent whether this replaces Rampage in like Throne decks that are getting really aggressive. But yeah, this card's pretty powerful, and it clearly like fills a spot that it takes over a spot that currently Rampage is filling. I think you could play this in Throne. But yeah, very good in draft and other formats. It just deals a lot of damage. I think we've talked about Customs Officer before. Put an enemy unit into its market, and then Entomb. Yeah, we've discussed that one before. Rail Driver we've played with a little bit in the draft preview. It's a 3/3 weapon for 5. There's a lot of reasons that this card is actually decent to pick up in draft, and the main one is that basically I think there's an entire cycle of cards that fetch colorless cards from your draft. So if you pick up a Rail Driver, you just have a 3/3 weapon for 5 that you can play in any deck as long as you have a market. Cool stuff. Very, very cool. Yeah, the spoiler link is going to be in the description below, Alfred. It'll be spoiler.soulforgeladder.com. Tools of Oppression. Once per turn, you may discard a card to stun an enemy unit. So this happened to us in the draft preview. Our opponent was, like, just about to get killed by a big flyer. They played this card on their 7th power, or like they were about to play their 8th power. They played this card, and we looked at it and we were like, huh, that's a pretty high price to pay to stun a unit, but certainly works in draft. Definitely saves them in this scenario. They discard it, a Zoe of the Endless Horde, and then they Grasping at Shadowed it in the same turn. So, my evaluation of this card for draft is pretty high. It's obviously not going to do that to me every single time that I see it, but it does enable discard strategies, it does enable void-based strategies, and it does remove units from the field when you need them removed from the field. I think all of that, on top of it being colorless, makes it a pretty easy pick for draft. I can see it in Expedition. Like, discarding to stun is not bad. It basically just turns a card into like a Frost, except of course you don't, get the revenge, so you do lose card advantage, but forced discard is clearly something of a theme in this set, so I can see it in an Expedition deck as well. A little expensive for Throne. 3-cost relic of any kind is just like, not so much, and like the additional cost of discarding a card might end up being a bit too much of a hindrance in that setup. Still, does allow you to directly discard cards. There aren't that many relics that do that right now, so you might be willing to pay 3 for one that does so. Replicated Sellsword, regen, 2/1, summon plunder. Okay, I think this might be one of the first regen cards we've mentioned. It is a common. You will see it everywhere, and so we do need to discuss a thing about regen right now. Hopefully, they fix this before the set releases on Monday. Right now, the way that regen is visually represented is that it shows as like an orange like sort of glow around that like overflows the unit portrait. So it's a little bit more, it's something you can distinguish basically from Aegis, which is nice. However, it blinks on and off, which is also fine. When it blinks on and off, it plays a noise. And it does this every 2 seconds for the entirety of the time that it has regen, which needs to stop. Like, probably the single worst UI decision that Eternal has made, and one of the single worst UI decisions I've seen in a card game. Really, really bad. gotta not do that. This card, basically, I would never play in draft at this point. I mean, I've picked it a couple of times. I just, like, I actually, like, dramatically will play this card less just due to how annoying that sound is. So, I don't know. Just something to mention about it that, like, should probably be fixed soon. Anyways, 2-1 regen does actually stand up against a lot of stuff and stall at the board and create a lot of unusual situations where 2/2s can't attack and like make it so you have to spend removal on it twice. This is an okay filler card in common for draft, and it's probably an okay filler card in expedition, but not something you want to play a lot of. Okessa's Audience. Summon Plunder, pay 2 to sacrifice Okessa's Audience to create and draw a 5/5 Sentinel. Easy way to get some cards into your Void for those 5/5 dragons, so probably an Expedition card, maybe even a Throne card if you just really want to play Throne colorless. In any case, Summon Plunder is pretty useful. The pay 2 ability to sacrifice is useful for activating your powers, and in draft, you're basically playing this for the 5/5 Sentinel, which you're okay doing because the card has Plunder and therefore fixes your power. So yeah, strong card all around. Obviously not like breaking the like mold as far as like how it's strong. It's not a bomb, it's just something that really fits well anywhere that you're putting it. If you're trying to make a colorless deck happen, then Expedition or Throne, you're pretty happy to have this card just so that you can put something in your Void. If you're trying to make this happen in draft, you're pretty happy to have this because of the Plunder and the Sentinel. In both situations, great card, just like total B average. Junk Obstructor, Berserk Summon Plunder. It's a Grenadin, which is really nice. Colorless Grenadin are cool. This card has Berserk, which means you can buff it with a bunch of different stuff. We played with it a bit. I enjoyed it. I think it's like a C in draft, but it's still something that you're going to pick quite a bit because of the Plunder and because of the ability to basically like, yeah, Plunder and colorless is just very powerful because it's kind of seek powery and gives you the ability to do lots of aggressive, horrible nonsense. There is a card that gives +4 and Overwhelm at fast spell speed, so Junk Obstructor is probably a pretty strong aggro card in Rakano decks. Beyond that, I don't think you're going to see a lot of play in Expedition or a lot of play in Throne. Plunder is just not that important in those particular setups. Big question was, are the Silixes coming back? And the answer is no. The other 5 Silixes are going to be printed out of order. That does not surprise me in the least, because if you stick 10 Silixes together in a single pair of sets, it's going to get pretty slow and weird. Instead, we have these, Feln Paintings, which are cards that really benefit aggro decks that want to play multiple colors and play with really, really aggressive setups. So the paintings give you an extra health, which is pretty useful, are undepleted, which is also pretty useful, but only while you already have 2 or more maximum power. Or rather, they're only while you have 2 or less maximum power. Wait, well, you already have 2 or more. Okay, yeah, so they're depleted even when you have 2. They're only good on turn 1. I was thinking that, like, if this is something that allows you to play 2 drops, they're actually quite good. But, yeah, you can only play 1 drops with them. It's a little bit less useful. Basically, like, this is still a nice card to be playing down so that you can play, like, your red-green Valkyries on turn 3. Seems reasonable if you want to do, like, a green Valkyrie or something like that and then, like, set other things up. Although I think the Rakano one is not actually in the format. So, yeah, we've got Feln, Huru, and Cambrai. Here's the Huru one. It's a picture of an owl, of course. The Feln one is a picture of the Feln eye. The Cambrai painting is a painting of the Cambrai symbol with the stars. So yeah, you know, got your standard stuff going on. These are fine. The Stonescar painting is a painting of a pickaxe. Stonescar really needs to get its act together on their branding. Anyways, these are okay cards, and the Praxis painting is dope, as always. Praxis symbol is just, like, it rules. Like, I don't know what to tell you. It's like a really amazing symbol. This is actually the biggest Praxis symbol that we've seen, and so you get a really nice look at it and how just like actually dope this particular symbol is. This is one of our emotes for Twitch, so like if you if you are a sub on my Twitch, you can send up your Praxis banners. But like, I love Praxis. They have such good branding. This is a really, really cool insignia, and makes sense to have a cool painting of it. Very, very into it. Okay, so yeah, all the paintings are okay. They're decent aggro options that allow you to fix a decent amount of power. Obviously, we're probably going to go Scythe Painting, which is fine. I think that's going to be pretty okay, and we'll see some neat stuff happen as a result of that. Okay, next up, we got Metal Fang. This card is S tier in draft. It is stupid. Yeah, this is already in the draft preview, and I think if you pick it, you might just win. Like, it's real strong. I'm not sure if we've beaten it once yet. We've definitely been picking cards specifically to be able to kill Metal Fang, and it's an uncommon, so you can stack these. This is probably going to be the most hot. The only thing that's going to stop this card from being like a 4 of in your like draft decks is the fact that everyone else is going to be picking it as well. It's a 6-cost 5/4. When you summon it, it plays a Ticking Grenadin, which is the sack to Entomb for 3 damage, and a 1/1 Grenamender, which is the sack to Entomb for 3 health. Pay 3 and sack another unit to give Metal Fang flying, charge, and lifesteal this turn. Charge, probably not going to happen, but at 9, certainly not unreasonable in a draft. You can definitely do that. But basically, this is a 5/4 that flies at your face, has lifesteal, and has flying. And it sacks a Grenadin, so it deals an extra 3 damage to your face, or heals you for an extra 3, depending on which you need at the time. In both of those situations, you are super, super happy to be playing Grenadin that are worth sacrificing, because this card is bonkers good at coming across for as much damage as you could possibly need. Since you only have to pay 3 to sacrifice another unit, you have plenty of like space to put other weapons on this card, make it into the big flying bomb of your dreams, and it's an uncommon. You just get to pick it a lot. It's a Valkyrie too, which means it enables Valkyrie Warp and a bunch of other stuff, despite the fact that it's a Grenadin friend. Yeah, this card just does kind of everything in a draft format. In Expedition, I definitely see it being playable. It's not amazing in that format. It's not like, like flying units are important in Expedition, but like this is, yeah, this thing's on like a whole other level in draft. It's absolutely ridiculous. And it should be a rare. I have no idea why it's an uncommon. In any case, super good bomb, does a lot of different things. The sacrifice thing is just like not a drawback because it gives you 2 things that you want to sacrifice immediately, and then like after that you're probably just sacking Grenadin that you want to sacrifice, which means that you got a benefit out of having a sacrifice outlet. Yeah, it's all upside in draft, and it's just amazing. There's not too much to say about it. I think this card's stupid good. Power Cell, Decay. When you play another Sentinel, Power Cell gets +1 strength. Summon, create, and draw a Power Burst, which, yeah, that's pretty neat. It's a 0-cost. Power Burst is a 0-cost that gives you an extra power for the turn. So, yeah, Decay is useful. The Sentinel ability is useful, and the Power Burst is definitely useful and means that you can play cheap stuff very easily. It is, I think, one of the best possible ways to secure your ramp from 3 to 4. Yet I don't know that there's a card that it can actually like do a better job of securing your ramp from 3 to 4. So like consider all of the other stuff that you can play in this format that can like do this kind of stuff. There's temporary ramp cards, all of which have to be in play and live for the turn. And then there's permanent ramp cards like Trailmaker and Apprentice Mage and Power Stone, for example. Relics tend to make a big difference, but they aren't units, which is usually a pretty big drawback. In this case, this has like Trailmaker stats. It also has Decay, which is a big bonus. It also has a +1 ability, which is a big bonus because it means it can stand up to big stuff. And you get the temporary ramp, which means that you can pretty easily play your 4. It's flexible, so you can use it whenever you want to play like your 5th or your 6th or whatever. Typically, you only need to play like 1 big bomb ahead of schedule to get ahead on tempo. This is a really powerful card. Clearly super strong for Praxis. A lot of fun. I love the design of the card. It's a cool Sentinel amongst other things, and like the only card that currently matches it in terms of like consistency is the Shift 1/3 that like because there's so few ways to actually make that die, but Power Cell puts the card into your hand, which, yeah, that's a big deal. And it puts a spell into your void, which is another big deal if you want to play stuff like Moment of Creation later on. All good stuff. Definitely going to be seeing play in Throne. Definitely going to be seeing play in Expedition. Definitely going to be seeing play in Draft. It's ramp, so ramp is like crucial, but not like insanely powerful, I still think the card's like pretty dang good. Hookblade Infuser is a flying decay that has Fate. If you have a relic weapon, it gets +4 strength and decay. I misread this, and I actually was reading it as if like if you drew relic weapons, they'd get decay. But yeah, this is something that like basically makes one of your like weaker relic weapons into kind of a monstrosity. Turns your like 1/5 decay into a 5/5 decay. You can do some pretty wild stuff with that. Clearly a pretty strong draft card. If you have it on like some sort of like berserk or quick draw option, I think one of the ones that's currently available is there's a 1/1 that has quick draw with onslaught, boot knife. So yeah, there's some neat things that you can do with this in draft that are going to be a lot of fun. I'm a little more skeptical of it in Expedition or Throne. Like recursion wise, Hookblade Infuser can definitely see some strength, but A, it's not super well statted, and B, you have to draw it and the relic weapon together, which is, yeah, a little less okay. It does give all your spells decay if you give a relic weapon decay, because that's just like part and parcel. I could definitely see it being played with something along the lines of like Authoritarian Creation in Expedition or Throne. That's a 3-color deck in Corendon, but hey, kind of a lot of fun, because you get a 5/5 Authoritarian Creation, and I think you can only have it killed by damage. Neat stuff. Or I think, does it make them immune to damage? It might be the other way around. In either case, you get some like neat, like cool synergies. So yeah, this might belong in a Throne or Expedition deck, but more likely it's just an interesting draft card that happens to provide a flyer and a benefit to your relic weapons. Zoom Coercion. Sack a unit to draw a card from your market. Fate, add a random shadow card to your market. Okay, this is super cool. Free market card that's random is really, really neat. Like, that's just something you're always happy to see, right? Because it's in your market, so you're not like, oh, I drew a random card and it sucks, blah. It's just like, oh yeah, this is a nice little bonus. Like, you don't have to take the card. You can take whatever card from your market you want. Sacrificing a unit is generally like a good thing. You can do this at fast spell speed, which means you can do it like at Devour speed. That makes this card a lot more powerful. Expedition wants it. Draft wants it. I think Throne wants it, honestly. It's a little expensive for Throne, but maybe. Hoarding Builder. Summon, put 2 cards of your choice from a player's void into their market when you really, really need to punish Reanimator. Beyond that, not really a good card. 3-cost 2/2s, not very good stat lines. This is a pretty low end of like what summons can do for 3-cost 2/2s. Yeah, and then like they can get it out of their market anyways, so if it's a really big card that you didn't want them to have, there's so many different ways for them to access it now. It does allow you to put cards from your void into your market, which is sort of a good thing. But I think you use this as a hate card more often. In either case, it's not great. I wouldn't play it in Expedition or Throne. I probably wouldn't play it in Draft. Or in Taxation. Lifesteal. Deal 3 damage to the enemy player. Does this look like the worst card in the set? It isn't, but it certainly does look like it. Deal 3 damage to the enemy player for 3 with Lifesteal is actually an okay effect. And the reason why is that spell damage is a thing in Feln. There's going to be a bunch of cards that have Snipe, or play Snipe in the format. They are going to be in blue and purple. There's going to be a bunch of Grenadin that increase spell damage in the format. So the draft spell damage setup that you are playing is a bunch of cards that create Snipe, and Orin Taxations up the wazoo. We already played some rounds with this deck. I drafted it pretty poorly, but it still actually did pretty well. I think we got 4 wins with it. I don't really remember. We did okay with it, and like Orin Taxation was generally pretty solid every time that we played it for 5 damage. Like that's just a really nice thing. Dealing 5 damage to someone, gaining 5 life, feels like a pretty good way to try to finish the game. Overall, really obviously not a strong card. You don't play it in Expedition, you don't play it in Throne. It's just a draft card, and like, yeah, it doesn't do a lot. But hey, if you are playing it with a bunch of spell damage cards, this is like a thing that supports a particular setup. You just don't play it anywhere else, and it'll be fun. Vine Grafter. Regen. Ultimate, pay 3 to swap a card from your hand for a shadow card or a factionless card from your market, then giving it in your hand +1/+1 on regen. The Grafter cycle is pretty powerful. They are all pretty solid, and this one has been a serious pain. I definitely found this one to be pretty irritating. I saw someone give this regen, and then also I think give the unit that they got regen. So yeah, or give it revenge, and then give the unit, so like revenge and regen, and then it also markets again, and it just repeats and repeats and repeats. This is super sticky, and it makes everything else super sticky. That's pretty powerful, and like this market cycle is probably like the merchants of your set. They're really good in draft. They're really, really strong in expedition. You're probably going to play them in expedition and throne because they give you a lot of market access that you might not have, and they cost 2, which is pretty reasonable. Shadowhawk Cloak, unblockable summon plunder. This is a role player in draft and probably okay in an expedition or throne format. There's not that many ways to give a card unblockable permanently, and this one is a weapon that also happens to have plunder, which is like half a card sometimes. Like being able to turn off power and turn it into treasure troves is a big deal. Being able to turn cards into power is also a big deal. There are a lot of different ways to do that, but Shadowhawk Cloak is certainly not an unreasonable version of that. The main problem with it, of course, is that if you're playing this card to get your 3rd power, you're probably a little sad because you want to put this on a really big unit and not a really small unit. So the flexibility of it is not quite there in the way that you would expect it to be. I'd say this card is average in Expedition and Throne, or Expedition and Draft. You don't really play it in Throne, but maybe if you really, really need that unblockability. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to do it, but it's not the worst. The fact that it's permanent is just a big deal, and that makes it quite good in draft in particular. I think that like that amount of fixing for it really makes it quite worth it. Yeah, I'd rate it like a B in draft, probably like a C in expedition, and like a D in throne. None of those places is it going to just completely rock your world, but every time you put it on a 7/7, you're going to feel really happy. And if you manage to put it on one of those like 2/2s that grows, like the Sentinel that grows, or the other options that are just like constantly expanding, then you get the flexibility of being able to play for plunder early with the ability to like sort of grow a big unblockable unit late. And like, yeah, there's a whole Feln setup based around dealing spell damage and also dealing unblockable damage. That's something that Shadowhawk Cloak really helps with. This is a role play card that like does a lot of work in draft in particular. Metabot Station. Summon, play a 1/1 Gretander as a relic. If you just did that like as a relic, I think that's okay. Like, it's a 2-cost 1/1 Gretander, but you also get a relic on top of that, which triggers a bunch of different relic-related abilities. Sweet. The pay 4 ability sacrifices Metabot Station to play a 1/1 Gretander. I can't see you playing this that often, but it could be life-saving under the right circumstances. Strong draft card, decent expedition card. I mean, I would just pay 2 for a Gretander, as long as it had the relic attached to it. Like, that's sort of 2 cards worth of advantage, because you get to do your relic things that you need to do, like, say, for example, to trigger Crossbow Valkyrie, and then you also get a Grenadin, which you can sacrifice to Devour or to your market options or any number of other things. So, yeah, super solid, not that expensive, like, going up a cost to get access to both the relic and the sacrifice option is totally fine. It's like a solid C all around. Crossbow Valkyrie. Flying ultimate, when you play an attachment, play a snipe. Yeah, played with this a little bit. Like I said, Feln spell damage is a thing. If you're playing with a bunch of Grenadin and stuff like that, that is certainly something worth doing. This is a Valkyrie that is also pretty sticky. It's a 1/3, which, yeah, that's pretty hard to kill. And then you can put weapons on it. And when you play the weapons, you get to kill something small. All of that makes it a very good draft card. It's also a pretty sticky Valkyrie, which I think makes sense in Expedition if you're trying to trigger Valkyrie Warp. So I think it's probably a pretty good expedition card. Probably wouldn't play it in Throne. That stat line's pretty weak. Unless Throne has a really strong Valkyrie Warp card, not likely. Exotic Purchase. Summon, draw a spell from your market, pay 5 and sacrifice Exotic Purchase to draw a spell from your market. Yay! Yeah, this card does a lot of different things. Mostly it is just like selection from your market, on top of selection from your market. It's expensive. It's not quite like Celestial Omen level of strength. It is a little bit cheaper, and you do get 2 cards worth of advantage out of it eventually. Costs 10 to get 2 cards. The 2 cards are selected from your market, which is nice, and you don't have to trade anything for them, which is also nice. I think if you can reduce the cost of this somehow, you're going to play it in Expedition, but most likely this is an okay option in Throne to just get access to those later spells that you want to play, or to play a spell market, or to just like make a market happen at all. But it's really slow. I would say like a D in Expedition and like a C in Draft. It just wouldn't really play it very much. Kind of a D in both, really. And I don't think I'd play it in Throne. Plated Hook Claw. Your spells deal +1 damage, 3/3, granted and beast. This is the like common for Feln in this draft format. Like I said, if you're playing like the snipe deck, if you're playing with like deal damage and gain life, this card will do a lot of work for you. Like, it will definitely make a lot of different things happen. 3/3 for 4 is not a great stat line, but it's fine. You're probably going to be playing these quite a bit just so that you can get your snipes off, play your like greed, pot of greed, greed's rewards. And like if you can get that kind of stuff going, like to actually deal like a bunch of extra damage and get a bunch of extra cards, or you want to play like bigger honey pots, or play like your the 3 damage lifesteal cards, your decay cards. This just buffs a lot of different things, and it's a reasonable stat line for the format. It's certainly no like, it's not a 3/3 flyer for 3, but at a common, it means that you can get access to spell damage fairly cheaply, and it's not going to be easy to destroy or even limited to just one color pairing, which is two things that have been true of the previous cards that did this in like other formats. So yeah, you can get a lot of them out, and when you get a lot of them out, a lot of your other cards become a lot better. That makes it an okay draft card and a pretty bad card everywhere else. Gatecrash Trooper. Aegis, Fate, each player draws a card. I don't see this in Expedition or Throne except as part of a transpose market. Because like getting a 3/2 and then drawing a new card is kind of interesting. But yeah, it seems unlikely to be played in like anything other than markets in Expedition or Throne, just not strong enough. In a card draw based deck, like if you're playing the Howling Mine deck, maybe this has a place, because it definitely costs cards to deal with. It is a soldier, and its fate ability makes everybody draw cards, which you get advantage from right away. That actually is maybe the reason that I could see this card being played in other formats. Like, there aren't that many cards that just immediately make you draw an extra card. This really supports market play, which is a big deal. Yeah, I think I'm actually revising my opinion on this a little bit, because you can basically get like the sort of snowball Jotun Hurler type effect, where you're just trading the card for other cards, or like doing a bunch of other stuff and getting a lot of value out of the fact that you have a lot of cards while also like punishing your opponent for other cards. So I can see this in Expedition or Throne for that reason. In Draft, it's sort of the same deal. If you can really benefit from having a lot of extra cards, and you think it'll disrupt the balance of your opponent's deck that they have a lot of extra cards, this is something where you get some pretty decent value right away. And unlike most abilities that make your opponents draw extra cards, this triggers on your turn, which means that you get the advantage of having two different things to do on turn 4, either the Gatecrash Trooper or the extra card that you drew with the Gatecrash Trooper. So yeah, neat stuff, but mostly like mildly inflexible. It's like a B, C in Draft, and then like in Expedition or Throne, you just have to be playing the Howling Mine deck or some sort of control. Stalking Cyberfang. It's a Berserk 4/4 if you have 2 or more units. Otherwise, it's a 2/2 Berserk for 3, which is a bad-ish stat line. I haven't played with this one in Draft yet. I have felt happier picking other choices. It could be okay if you want to not go spell damage in like a Grenadin deck, but I am not sure if it's really going to come across that often. That fate ability is tough. Getting 2 or more units down to get the 4/4 is a pretty big deal. Once you have it, then like, yay, that's not too bad at all, but like you do still have to like play the unit and get the unit to attack and attack twice, and you have to do all that like before turn 3. So like, it's something like play a Grenadin drone on turn 1, draw Stalking Cyberfang on turn 2 or turn 3. And like the chance of that is not that high, so I'm skeptical that this card is actually all that powerful. This seems like a bit of a trap in Draft, and I don't like it in Expedition either. You can get some support for it, but like a 4/4 Berserk is just like, getting a 3-cost 4/4 Berserk is just not that strong, especially if you're not getting it on turn 3, which seems very likely considering what the card does. So yeah, I don't think it's particularly good. I think it's deceptive in terms of what it offers and whether or not you're actually going to get that at the appropriate tempo at the appropriate time. Rage Grafter, 2/2 Berserk, pay 3 to swap a card from your hand for a primal card or a factionless card from your market, then give a unit in your hand +1/+1 in Berserk. Grafters are pretty strong. This one gives you extra damage and also gives you another 2/2 Berserk unit. Skycrag has access to a lot of Berserk units, so you can do some pretty interesting stuff with this. Giving Berserk to a market card is not that useful, so this might be one of the weaker ones in the cycle. Having Berserk on a 2/2 is pretty useful, and you can definitely do something with that. Sparking Vermin, Entomb Play Snipe. Only do it if you're doing spell damage. I mean, it's okay if you're playing like a sacrifice deck and you just want to, ping small things every now and then. The Snipe ability is a spell that deals 1 damage. So basically, yeah, a spell that does 1 damage for 1. Not too bad to play off of a 1/1. This is along the same lines as like the Firemane Cub and like other cards along that sort of general format. You have to sacrifice it to get the value out of it or like block with it, but I mean this card does trade with like 2/2s pretty commonly and it's a 1-cost. So yeah, you'll see a decent amount of play out of this and it's a common, so not a bad draft card. I could see a spell damage expedition card playing this, or some sort of expedition deck that really just wants to get a lot of spells into their void for some reason. Vicious Rail Driver, double damage relic weapon. First double damage relic weapon in green, and it also has more health than any other double damage relic weapon. Nope, that's not true. Bladerang for 4 is a 1/4 that has double damage, and that doesn't see play either. I don't know if double damage is really that important in green. Green can definitely support relic weapons better, so this has some potential. I could see Expedition doing something with this. I could see some kind of spell damage deck happening. I'm overall skeptical. In draft, this is a 4/4 relic weapon for 6 that also war cries really well. Like the war cry ability in particular is just really, really nice, and the fact that it's slower doesn't really like hurt it very much. I think this is fine. Oh yeah, Bladerang is actually a 1/3, so this is a little bit tougher, and it does respond better to war cries and other sort of buffs. Yeah, I can see this in Expedition as a replacement for Bladerang, which is not a very common card in the first place. And then like in draft, this is a pretty good removal card. You just want to play like war cries and other things that buff like things in your hand or things in your void. Stormhalt Warden, 3/2 Entomb. You can swap a card unit in your hand for a unit from your market. It's a bad card with bad art. The art style is very different from everything else. It's really poorly statted, and the Entomb ability is like, it's okay. Marketing as an Entomb is not really a thing you want to do all that much. It's kind of nice to like harsh rule and then trade into your market after that, but if you harsh rule, then you don't know what's going to get played next, so you have the least amount of information possible to make a market choice. And you paid 5 for this card. So Expeditioner Throne? No, you're not going to play this card. Draft? I don't see why you'd play this card. Do you really need something to happen for your market? That you still have to swap a unit. So you have to have a unit in your hand to swap for the unit from your market. I think this is the worst card in the set. Not the 3-cost Lifesteal. I think this card is the worst card. And I also think it's... yeah, that art style doesn't match anything else that I have seen. In Eternal, it looks like a piece of guest art, and it's just really out of place. Yeah, I don't know. Don't love this one. Real bad. Plate Grafter, 2/2 Endurance. Are we gonna go to a part 3? How many of these do we have left? A lot. Might have to go to a part 3. We will probably cut after the 45-minute mark. It's the big spoiler breakdown, folks. Alright, Plate Grafter, Endurance. Ultimate, pay 3 to swap a card from your hand for a green card or a factionless card from your market. Then give a unit in your hand +1/+1 on Endurance. 2/2 Endurance is a pretty good stat line. It's a Sentinel, which is really relevant setup. So yeah, that's good. Endurance is useful, and it gives the unit endurance as well. All of that makes it an amazing draft card. This cycle is all amazing in draft. Like, that's just goes without saying. But yeah, like, this is good in Expedition as well, and I would probably play it in Throne too. Like, endurance is just really useful. Being able to stop things from getting stunned is really nice, and giving endurance to other cards is really handy. Like, amongst other things, you can just like mark it for like a hero of the people, and then you have a immediate 3/3 endurance hero of the people. Yay. Anyways, it's a reasonable option. Emerald Overcharger. Summon, give a unit +2/+2 this turn. Pay 1 and sacrifice Emerald Overcharger to give a unit +2/+2 this turn. This is like an A to S card in draft. It's much better than it looks. It is an immediate +2/+2 bonus to any number of Berserk, Lifesteal, Flying, whatever cards. You get the relic afterwards, which means it's one of the more powerful cards that you can play because that does this particular type of effect. It's better than the card draw option. It's better than the Grenamender option. It's super cheap, and it only pays 1 to get the additional +2/+2, which means you can pay 3 to get a +4/+4 bonus to any unit on the turn you're attacking with it, which, if you're playing with a Berserk card, is a total of something along the lines of 10 damage to 12 damage. Really, really good stuff. Yeah, this is a draft role player. I think it might see some play in Expedition aggro. It's clearly, like, this cycle's clearly designed for draft, but could see some play. Bastion Gatekeeper, 3/1 summon Plunder. Once per turn, you can pay 3 to double its strength and health this turn. Really cool if you can get some war cries on it. It's got Plunder. It's a 3/1, so Expedition viable? Absolutely. Plunder is really, really useful, and the pay 3 ability, if you can figure out some ways to actually like buff this thing up or put weapons on it, could end up being pretty scary. Like, if you stick a big weapon on this and then double it up every turn, that might be a lot of problems for your opponent. The 1 health is a big deal, but there's also ways to give Sentinels regen in this format, and some of them are pretty cheap. So Bastion Gatekeeper can double on top of double, and it does it at common. Draft, this is a very, very good card. It's going to fill most of your green 2-drop slots, and you're pretty much always going to pick it, but under like removal and bombs. So yeah, super, super good. Drifting Drone, flying lifesteal +1 for each relic in your void. It's okay. In draft, this can be reasonable if you got a lot of relics in your void. I've seen a lot of people playing it in draft, and they haven't really gotten much to do with it. It's just a lot of setup to get a really good Drifting Drone. And it also doesn't have like the standard stat line of like the 1-cost Sentinels. You know, it's usually, these are usually 0/3s. This is vulnerable and difficult, and I don't think it's going to be all that great. But if you have some way to like give it charge or something like that, like if it's like part of like a Frontier Jito type thing, and you can put a bunch of relics in your void, then I could sort of see it in Expedition. I think it's like a C, maybe a D in draft. It certainly can be ridiculous. Like, a big flying lifesteal card is really irritating, and even if this is like a 2/2 for 1 with lifesteal, you're pretty happy with that. But like, the cost to get relics into your void in draft is still, as far as I know, somewhere in the like 2 to 3 range. I guess Emerald Overcharger significantly improves its status in draft, because you play Emerald Overcharger on this on 2, you get a 2/4, and then you sack it again, and you get a 3/5. That's decent. Yeah, okay, that turns me around a little bit on it. Emerald Overcharger with Drifting Drone, both commons. I can see a lot more play of that. I've just seen this card played solo so many times without the Overcharger, and then it just does nothing, and it's pretty easy to remove. Silver Titan, Endurance, Fate, draw a card if you have a Sentinel, 6/6 for 7. So yeah, free cards are nice. Probably not nice enough to play a 6/6 for 7 in Expedition, but in draft this card is great. Skyguard Sentinel, 5/5 flying on the enemy turn. Again, probably a draft card, not really an Expedition or Throne card. Flying on the enemy turn is just a really good draft ability that makes it so that flyers can't hurt you, while also giving you something with a big stat line that you can attack with. Both really relevant things. This card is just like a nice little role player in draft, not an Expedition card. Malaga League Diver, summon, create, and draw an Astromancer's Compass. 3/3 for 5, which certainly not great. Astromancer's Compass is also not a great relic, so the value here is that it does draw you a card. That's about the only thing I can say for it. It's an explorer that draws you a relic, and the relic is relevant. It's like a D in draft, not great. and expedition-wise, probably wouldn't play it. Expand the reach, plunder, then play a sigil of your choice from your deck depleted. You don't, I think, have to plunder. I think plunder is always optional, but the sigil of your deck choice from your deck is generally useful ramp. This fixes 3-color decks really well, which is nice. So I think it's probably going to see some play in time decks. It also is plunder in time, and it's not very inexpensive. I think this is a great way to get your ramp going, get yourself up to those 5s and 6s. It's quite a role player in draft. It's still like a B tier card. It's not something you pick super highly, but it really does make the deck work. So definitely worth it in a draft format. Okay, we're at 50 minutes, so we're going to go to part 3. And we'll call that in just a little bit. Be back in just a moment, folks. And thank you once again for watching.